hangs where words should be. Men rush to fill the air. Stillness keeps its seat. Every echo begs for meaning. Every boast leaks out. The loudest thing in power is what never comes out. Oh, eyes learn faster than mouth. Oh, weight is felt, not shown. Silence does the talking. It says more than sound. Silence does the talking. When real men are around. Silence does the talking. No defense, no crown. Chairs turn when footsteps slow. No need to name the cause. Respect arrives on time, without applause. Promises rot in daylight. Truth survives the dark. The room already knows who left the mark. Silence does the talking. It settles every doubt. Silence does the talking. When words burn out, no clarification, no record set straight. Gravity explains itself funny ways. Silence does the talking. Always has, always will. Silence does the talking. Power stands still. Morning comes without mercy. Steel air in the lungs. Discipline wakes early before excuses are sung. Every scar is a legend. Every step has weight. The road remembers effort, not fate. Luck doesn't stay. Work remains. Nothing here was given. Every inch was paid. No Hands steady from repetition, eyes calm from restraint. Patience learned its lesson from delay and pain. No shortcuts survive winter, no masks outlast time. What stands at the finish was built line by line. Nothing here was given, no favors called in. Oh, nothing here was given. That's the difference. Applause fades fast, structure holds. Nothing here was given. That's why it's real. Oh, nothing here was given. That's why it doesn't kneel. He knocks hard at the door. Old ghost won't in. The lock was forged by discipline. Anger makes promises it never keeps. Calm collects interest while fury sleeps. Control is heavier than fire. Rage waits outside, it doesn't decide. Rage waits outside. I choose who survives. Rage waits outside. Power doesn't flinch, it measures first. Reaction feels fast, but patience hurts worse. Victory isn't loud, it's precise. The sharpest blade never swings twice. Rage waits outside, let it knock all night. Rage waits outside, the door stays tight. Emotion begs, order commands. Rage waits outside. Control stays inside. Footprints fade in the snow, impact stays below. Time keeps keeps better records than people know. Statues crack, names dissolve. What's built in silence still evolves. Legacy isn't loud, it's layered. No witness needed. The work stands still. No witness needed. It bends a will. No witness needed. Crowds confuse noise for proof. History doesn't care. Truth moves slow, but arise prepared. Validation is hunger. Purpose eats last. What endures wasn't chasing the past. No witness needed. No hands to shake. No witness needed. The ground remembers weight. Time nods quietly to what lasts. No witness needed. That's the rule. No witness needed. Power is cruel and patient. Impatient. Still water runs the deepest. Nobody warned you about that. The loudest man in the room is the most afraid. Watch how he fills the silence with everything he's never made. Patience has a jawline, discipline has eyes. The ones who never hurry are the ones who never die. I don't raise my voice, I raise my standards. The storm already passed through me. I am what remains after. Still water doesn't beg to move. It carves a stone in its own time. Still water doesn't beg to move. And the canyon proves it, line by line. Men mistake silence for weakness. Let them. That miscalculation is the only edge I need from them. Every word I didn't say built something they can't touch. Every battle I walked away from showed me I had more than enough. There's no trophy for composure, no crowd cheering for the restraint. But the man who holds himself together is the only man who genuinely reigned. Watch men burn their bridges just to feel the heat. Watch them trade their dignity for a moment in a seat that never held them long enough to call it anything but borrowed. Power chased for showing off. It's power that stays hollow. The river didn't argue, the mountain didn't explain. They just remain what they were through every season, every rain. There's a kind of man who never has to announce himself. Rooms adjust, conversations shift, that gravity, that quiet lives on the highest shelf. Not performed, not proclaimed, just present, like the depth of water with no name. Still water doesn't beg to move. It carves a stone in its own time. Still water doesn't beg to move, and the canyon proves it, line by line. The river never argued with the rock. It just kept going, it just kept going, and the rock eventually gave way. Before the name meant anything, there were cold mornings with no witness. Before the handshake meant respect, there was solitude, just business. The world rewards the outcome, it never builds the hours. Every easy thing you see in me was bought in darker towers. No one held the door, no one lit the path, just a man and what he owed himself, and the mathematics of the aftermath. You see the smoke, you miss the fire. You see the calm, you miss the cause. Every man who stands this steady knows exactly what he almost lost. Comfort is a slow erosion, ease is just a different kind of cage. What a man becomes in difficulty is the only thing that ages into grace. Took nothing that wasn't earned, kept nothing that wasn't true. The version of me standing here was built from what I went through. Some men inherit their footing, some men pour the concrete themselves. The difference shows in the walking, in what a man carries and what he shows. There were nights that tested the structure, mornings that questioned the frame, seasons that stripped every comfort and left just the will and the name, and the will was enough. Barely, but enough. That's the thing about discipline, it holds when everything else gives up. The man who trains in the silence doesn't pray for an easier test. He just narrows his eyes at the mountain and reminds himself this is the rest. This is what separates the decided from the ones who simply wish. The fire was the making, you only see the finish. Some men pray for easy roads, I learned to love the grade. The resistance was the teacher, the struggle was what made something worth the having, something that won't fade. No shortcut worth taking, no wound worth avoiding. Every scar has a lesson, every loss has an anointing. You see the smoke, you miss the fire. You see the calm, you miss the cause. Every man who stands this steady knows exactly what what you leave behind. Doesn't care what you were called. Doesn't care about the accolades or how many names are scrawled. The tree doesn't know who sits beneath its shade. The foundation never asks to be remembered or repaid. Build it anyway, build it clean and true. Legacy is not a trophy case, it's what holds after you. The table has no mirror. It doesn't need to see its own worth. You know a man by what he left standing, not by what he claimed on earth. Vanity is loud and dies young. Substance barely speaks. The ones who chased the monument left nothing for the weeks. It turned the years to decades, nothing standing, nothing true. What outlives you is the only question, everything else is a residue. The ones who need a statue never understood the point. The ones who built the quiet things are the ones that time anoints. Watch men spend their whole lives collecting what they couldn't keep. Titles, praise, and properties all gone before the sleep that comes for everyone regardless of what they owned or claimed. The only currency that crosses over is the life that someone named as the reason they kept going, the standard that they held. Not a plaque, not a portrait, just a story someone tells to their children in the evening. Just a principle passed down. That's the table without mirror. That's the legacy that's found, not in marble, but in marrow. Not in fame, but in the flame, kept alive by those who knew you and chose to live the same. There's a difference between a name and what the name protects. One is ego dressed in marble, one is something that connects. The ones who come behind you to something they can hold, a standard, not a statue. Something quiet, something old, something that doesn't need the world to validate its weight. Something built in the early hours, something that can wait. The table has no mirror. It doesn't need to see its own worth. You know a man by what he left standing, not by what he claimed on earth. Build a table, set the standard, walk away from the applause. Let the wood speak for itself. That's all. What they call cold is a lake in January, still on the surface holding everything it's ever carried. Depth is not warmth, depth is weight. The ones who feel the most are the ones who learn to wait. Before they speak, before they break, before they hand their wound to someone who won't hold it straight. Restraint is not indifference, control is not a wall. It's the hand that doesn't tremble when it matters most of all. Cold is not the absence of feeling, it's the discipline of not letting go. The river doesn't stop because it's frozen. frozen, it just moves beneath what doesn't show. Every rage that went unspoken built something in its place. Every grief that moved in silence left dignity inside the space. A man who bleeds in public owns nothing but his wound. A man who walks through fire quietly owns every single room. They were waiting for the fracture, waiting for the scene to show. But a man who's been through pressure learns exactly what to hold and what to let dissolve quietly, what to carry and what to release. The hardest kind of power is the power to find peace in the middle of the fire, in the eye of what would break. A man with less foundation, a man with less at stake. Lost things that deserved a funeral, held grief like a stone in each hand, walked the rooms that would have broken any man who didn't understand. That feeling isn't weakness, performing grief is. There's a difference between the wound and the theater of what it gives to the audience that watches, to the crowd that needs the show. Real pain has no applause sign. Real pain moves below, beneath the voice, beneath the posture, beneath the calm exterior. On the coldest rivers run the deepest, and we're running long before the storm. They wanted the explosion, they expected the collapse. What they got was just a stillness, a silence that perhaps said more than any outburst, held more than any cry. Composure is the hardest thing and the most honest kind of pride. Not the pride that needs a witness, not the strength that needs a name. Just the man who holds the center when everything else goes up in flame. Cold is not the absence of feeling, it's the discipline of not letting go. The river doesn't stop because it's frozen, it just moves beneath what doesn't show. Feeling everything, showing only what serves. That's not coldness, that's mastery, bought with years, not borrowed. What you are in the dark is the only truth that counts. The performance means nothing, it's the private life that mounts into something solid or crumbles like a set. The man you are when no one sees is the man you haven't buried yet. No witness needed, no approval sought. Identity is not a reputation, it's everything that can't be bought. Even the shadow has a shape, even silence has a spine. You cannot fake the silhouette that years of truth define. The ones who shifted with the crowd left no mark worth reading. The ones who stood in one direction, those are the ones worth heeding. Not rigid, rooted, not close, composed. There's a difference between a wall and a man who simply knows what he is and what he isn't, what he'll carry and what he'll leave. The clearest kind of power is the kind that doesn't need to breathe in the air of someone else's approval, to remember its own name. Spent time in the rooms where no one clapped, did the work that no one contract, built the spine of something lasting on the ground where nobody asked for credentials or for reasons, just results, just what remained when the weather turned against it and the structure held through rain. Solitude was not a punishment, it was a workshop and a throne. The man who fears his own reflection has never truly been alone, long enough to hear the difference between the noise and what is real, between the mask that draws the crowd in and the face beneath the seal. When looking in the empty spaces, found what couldn't be performed, a self that needed no approval, a center that had always formed underneath the years of searching, always there, already made. The shadow was the truest outline, the shape that doesn't age or fade. Solitude was the classroom, the mirror, the only grade passed. Every quiet morning earned what can never fade. Not a trophy, not a title, just a man who knows the ground and stands on it like it's sacred, without making any sound, without flinching, without apology, without waiting for the world to confirm what he already knows about the shape of who he is. Even the shadow has a shape, even silence has a spine. You cannot fake the silhouette that years of truth define. Know what you are in the dark, in the empty room. The shadow doesn't lie, that's the only mirror that matters, that's the only one that lasts. Somewhere along the road, man started needing permission, started crafting explanations for every quiet decision, as if the life you built required a defense attorney, as if the path you chose alone needed a public journey. The oak doesn't justify its roots, the mountain holds no press conference. What is silent needs no footnote, what is real requires no sentence. Written for the ones who question everything they didn't build. Explanation is for the uncertain, silence is for the fulfilled. Let them form their conclusions, let the verdict come and go. A man who knows his own foundation doesn't need the world to know. Wolves don't explain themselves to sheep, the river doesn't justify its course. The strongest things that ever moved this earth moved quietly and moved with force. Watch men spend their whole energy defending what they chose. Watch them shrink inside the argument and lose what no one knows. They were caring to begin with, that quiet inner knowing, the compass underneath the ribs, the private steady glowing of a man at peace with his direction. No applause required, no tribunal convened, no need to prove he's not retired from the version others wanted, the performance they had cast. He simply kept on walking and the questions couldn't last. Every hour spent explaining is an hour off the work. Every defense ever mounted left the builder in the dirt, of someone else's courtroom, someone else's terms. The man who needs no verdict is the man the verdict never earned. There's a freedom in the silence that justification kills, a lightness in the not explaining, in the walking past the hill. of opinion and of gossip of the narratives they spun. A man who owns his choices fully doesn't stand beneath their sun. He carries his own weather, he moves in his own time. The judgment of the uncommitted is not worthy of a line in the ledger of a man who built his life with both hands clean. What they said about the shadow doesn't change what the shadow means. Not arrogance, indifference, not coldness, clarity. The man who stopped explaining didn't lose his humanity. He just stopped performing it for an audience that came not to understand the story, but to attach it to a name they could reduce to something simple, something easy, something small. The wolf just kept on moving, didn't stop, didn't stall. Wolves don't explain themselves to sheep. The river doesn't justify its course. The strongest things that ever moved this earth moved quietly and moved with force. No defense, no explanation, no apology for being exactly what was built, that's all. Traveled far enough to know the distance doesn't cure the noise. Chased enough horizons to understand the decoys. How the next city feels like answer until the bags are on the floor. How the new beginning whispers freedom until you find the same old door. You carry with you all along, dressed in a different frame. The man who never learned his interior keeps arriving at the same. The map was always inward, the territory itself. And most men die as strangers to the country of themselves. No expedition needed, no compass pointing north, just the willingness to sit still and take account of what it's worth. The darkness and the clearing, the shame in what it made. The cartographer knows himself is never lost or afraid. The most uncharted land on earth is the one behind your eyes. Every man who truly knows himself, there's no need for disguise. Sat with every contradiction, named every fault without flinching. Didn't reach for the distraction when the truth was slowly inching toward the parts that needed facing. The vanities, the depths, the moments that don't make the story a man tells but never forgets. Took inventory like a ledger, balanced every column straight. What remained after the audit was the only thing worth the wait. Not the image or the title, not the version kept for show. Just the man in full accounting, just the parts that you don't show. Self-knowledge is not comfortable, it doesn't flatter or perform. It shows you where you calculated wrong and where you held the form. When nothing asked you to, it shows you both the failure and the standing. And the man who can hold both is the only man worth understanding. Stopped asking what the world reflected, started reading what was there. Beneath the patterns and the habits, beneath the posture and the care. There was armor more than nature, beneath the roles that calcified into something called a character before a man. man decides who he actually is beneath him, who he is when stripped of every name. When looking in the quiet places, found something that had always been the same. A core that hadn't shifted through the decades and the change. Something steady, something compass, something permanent in range. Call it the interior country. Drew the map with both hands. The man who knows that territory is the only man who stands on solid ground in every season, in every weather, every cost. Because he knows exactly where he is. He cannot be lost. Most men know their city, know their reputation and their street, know the version that the world approved, but not the one that beats beneath the chest at 3 a.m. when the noise is finally gone. That version is the real one. That's the one you build upon or run from for a lifetime. Mistake emotion for a cure. The cartographer just sat still, drew the outline, made it sure. The most uncharted land on earth is the one behind your eyes. Every man who truly knows himself has no need for disguise. Know the territory, draw the map with honesty, then move with the full weight of a man who knows where he stands. There are things that left and took the room with them. Silences that settled in the furniture, absences that bloomed in them. The chairs, the corners, the familiar light at a particular hour. Grief is architecture, it builds a different kind of tower than the one you plan to live in, than the life you thought was drawn. Loss is a renovation you never asked for, and yet the dawn still comes without permission, still arrives and asks you to begin the work of carrying it forward, of wearing it like something warm within, not forgotten, not released, just carried differently. The weight becomes the muscle if you walk with it deliberately. Ash remembers the fire, the scar remembers the wound. A man who's loved and lost completely carries everything he's been and moved. Didn't perform the morning, didn't need the room to know. Some losses are too genuine to hand over to the show. Held it in the chest like iron, walked the days like days require. Kept the standard, kept the discipline, kept enough of the fire to be useful, to be present, to be something to the ones still here. Grief that shuts a man down completely is grief that stops the year from turning into something, from becoming soil and then seed. The dead are best honored by the living who still lead. There is a kind of love that doesn't end at the graveside. It transmutes into something quieter, a compass running inside. Every choice made in the afterward, every standard held up high. Every morning walk with purpose, every quiet, dignified goodbye to the versions that no longer serve, and the faithful carrying on of everything that mattered and the one who now is gone. Lost heart, what comfort couldn't. Absence clarified, what presence blurred. When everything familiar disappeared, what remained was just the word. The core, what a man believed in before the world confirmed or broke. The fire strips away the surplus. What the ash reveals is what was real. Beneath the noise, the plans, the comfort, what remains when loss reveals the furniture of who you actually are. When everything that filled the room is gone. Walked out of that season different, not diminished, rearranged, not broken, clarified, not the same, exchanged for something that had earned its standing, something forged in actual flame. Grief was not the end of anything, it was how the foundation came. The ones who never lost anything speak of strength like it's a choice, like it's just a posture taken, like it's just a tone of voice. They don't know what it costs to keep the standard in the winter, to remain a source of something when the cold gets in the splinter of every plan and every promise. When the architecture fails, ash remembers. Ash holds everything the fire tells. Ash remembers the fire. The scar remembers the wound. A man who's loved and lost completely carries everything he's been and moved. Not past it, through it, carrying what was real, walking forward anyway. That's the only way grief heals. Every morning is a ledger, opening its column fresh. Every hour either builds something or quietly repossesses what was borrowed from the future, what was owed to the becoming. The man who wastes his decades hears it in the drumming of a life that's running shorter than the plans that filled his head. Time is the one creditor that collects before you're dead. Spent years watching men invest in everything but their own hours, spending distractions, spending comfort, spending someone else's towers of opinion and of urgency that turned to dust by Tuesday. And the clock kept no account of it, it just moved quietly, ruthlessly. Not afraid of the ending, afraid of arriving empty-handed, afraid of a life spent performing on a stage where nothing landed. The clock keeps no favorites, it doesn't care what you planned. The only question at the ending is what you built with what you had in hand. Stop spending time on the approval of the rooms that cost too much to enter. Stop rotating around the gravity of what was never the center of anything that mattered. Every hour redirected inward, toward the work, toward the standard, toward becoming something rendered in the permanent material, in the things that outlast the season. Time spent on what endures is the only time with reason. The rest is archaeology, digging through the years to find what actually happened underneath the noise and fears of the man who meant to do it but kept waiting for the sign. The sign was always the morning, the sign was always the line between the man who moved and the man who only planned. The clock kept no favorites, but it rewarded steady hands. There's a particular kind of peace in the man who uses hours, not perfectly, but honestly, not brilliantly, but with the powers he was given and he cultivated. The man who spent himself on something real can meet the clock at any hour and know exactly how he feels about the ledger and the balance, about the columns and the sum. Not everything was great, but nothing was left undone that could be done with what he had. That's the only score worth keeping. The clock keeps no favorites, but it witnesses the working and the sleeping. Legacy is just time that kept moving after you stopped. It's the hours you invested in the things that couldn't be cropped out of existence when you left them. The standards that kept standing, the principles that kept instructing, the quiet, steady handing of something forward to the ones who came into the space you made. Time is the only currency, and it was never meant to be saved. It was meant to be spent on something worth the spending, not hoarded in the safety of a life without an ending, worth describing without a sentence that could hold the weight of what was lived. The clock keeps no favorites, but it records exactly what was given. Stood at the edge of years and looked back down the road, not with regret, with inventory, taking stock of what was owed and what was paid and what was earned through honest use of time. The clock just kept its steady tempo, never missed a line. What matters isn't the duration, what matters is the density. How much life fit inside the hours, how much was done deliberately. The clock keeps no favorites, it doesn't care what you plan. The only question at the ending is what you built with what you had in hand. The hours are already leaving, they left while this was playing. The only question worth your answer, what are the ones remaining saying about the man who holds them? There's a tax on being loud, on announcing what you're building. The energy spent on the proclamation is the energy not filling. The foundation with its concrete, not set in beam and frame. Every man who told the city what he planned gave away the game. The ones who moved in silence built 3 floors while others talked. The ones who never sent the declaration were already 3 miles walked ahead of every conversation held about their capability. Underestimation is an asset if you have the clarity to let it stand uncorrected, to let them hold the ceiling low and build beneath their expectations, something they won't see until you show. Let the room look past you, let them place you in the back. The view from underestimated is a clear and unobstructed track. A quiet man moves mountains, he just doesn't post the footage. The ones who never saw him coming never understood the method in the stillness. Sat in rooms where the opinion had already been decided, where the outcome in the assessment had been neatly pre-divided into categories formed before the work could make its case. Didn't argue with the sort and just worked at a different pace. A pace that didn't need that bracket, a pace that answered to the work. Every dismissal was a dividend, every doubt became a quirk of their perception, not a verdict, not a ceiling, not a cap. The man who knows his own dimensions doesn't need their diagram or map. There's a particular silence in the man who's been dismissed and chose to use it as a workshop rather than a thing to resist. He didn't rage against the bracket, he just quietly outgrew the room. And when the evidence arrived, it didn't argue, it just bloomed into something undeniable, something that required no defense. The quiet man just nodded slightly and moved on to the next project. Not interested in the revelation, not performing the emergence. There's no moment being scripted, no dramatic resurgence planned for an audience of doubters, no speech prepared for the converted. The work was never for the witness. The mountain doesn't need to be asserted, it's just there, unmistakable, requiring no announcement. The kind of presence that arrives without a single pronouncement. That's the goal, not the moment, not the look on the face when they realize. Just the stain that kept in private, just a mountain, just the size of what was built in the silence of the years they weren't watching. That's the only satisfaction worth the decades and the cost of not stopping. They gave the spotlight to the loudest, they gave the headline to the bold. Watched the ceremony from a distance, kept working in the cold. Not bitter, unbothered, not wounded, just clear that the word was the point, not the witness, not the year of recognition or the handshake, just the thing itself, complete. The quiet man moves mountains, doesn't need a front row seat. The quiet man moves mountains, he just doesn't post the footage. The ones who never saw him coming never understood the method. In the stillness, not for the crowd, not for the record, not for the moment when they find